think dreams and nightmares exist and pretty much next to each other and sometimes overlapping. So I'll talk a little bit nightmare and a little bit dream in all of this. I've entitled my talk, well actually I entitled it differently last night, but I think the other day I entitled it Feeding the Soul to Feeding the Stomach. If you take a look at me, I've got a figure that's built for the food industry. I've got a body which is a temple to eating. I've been a professional eater all my life. I love food. One of the wonders of optical illusions is that people on top can see one less double chin than you guys on the bottom. So when you come down, you'll see there's one more than you can notice up there. But I love food. I think I've loved food pretty much from the minute I was born. And certainly grew up in a household that loved food. And my mum was a fantastic home cook, and I think just sowed the seeds of being interested in cooking from an very early age, and being exposed to foods today which sound very mundane. But I remember in 1971 having lasagna, and none of my friends knew what it was. And you forget how things have changed in that time, because my mum had been on a cooking course and had learnt in the catering school at Newsham Park College to learn to do some foreign cooking, and the foreign cooking at the time was Italian. In 1972, we had sweet and sour pork at home, which no one else had. My friends were still having corned beef and boiled potatoes, because we lived in Walton, and you didn't have a fancy existence. But through education in my life took a very, very different course. I did psychology here, actually, in Liverpool, and started out a life that for 25 years or so involved in some shape or form working with people with learning difficulties, initially as a volunteer, and then ending up working with families, with governments, with health services and social services all across the world to try and make lives better and services a lot better. So I remember, I think it was in the very early 1980s, setting up the very first community homes at the time to prove that people with learning difficulties didn't need to live in a hospital. Some of these things seem mad now, but at the time they were phenomenally revolutionary. And luckily, later on, went to the States and discovered fantastic local support services where people but with very significant disabilities had their own homes, were employing their own support. And I came back to the UK and worked to implement that elsewhere. And my career was going fantastically. I've got some pictures I've forgotten to put on. Was good at what I did. I loved what I did. But I always had this yearning to put my figure to good use, to all those years of learning about food, because you learn about food by eating. It's not an academic subject, I think. And if it was, I think I would be the most decorated professor, certainly in this room. And it always made a promise to myself that at some point I would stop what I was doing and try. And I wasn't sure what I meant by what I was thinking, make a living out of food, out of cooking or selling food. In fact, I can remember just down the road from here, my finals and my psychopharmacology option, sitting through it. It was a 2.5-hour exam. 20 minutes had gone by and I'd finished. Now, not because I'd done so much work. I was sitting there thinking, shit, why didn't I pay attention, do more revision, and turn up to more lectures? And I was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do with my life, because I'm going to fail my degree. And in 1985, I came up with this idea of a pizza delivery business. So this was before Domino's existed. So I could have been this fantastic multi-billionaire owner of this huge pizza delivery business. But I obviously didn't do too badly on my other options, because I ended up getting a very honourable 2-2, which people of my generation like to think today would be a first, but I know it's not. Yeah, so everyone's had the same, it would be a 2-2 today, believe me. But so I'd always had this idea, and I remember hitting my 40th birthday, and I was constantly wanting to cook and entertain for people at home. So we had a big party, packed our house, and going around telling everyone after a good few drinks, I'm going to stop the consultancy I do, and I'm going to open up a restaurant. And people were just looking at me as I was, just as a drunken 40-year-old getting carried away with the occasion. But I woke up the next morning with the courage I needed to do what I was doing, or what I was planning to do, and set about that. And it took me about 5 years to get out of to get away from, the career I had and the work I had, to really start to put the balls in motion to open up a restaurant. Very luckily I think it was sometime in the mid-90s, I had the opportunity to go to Barcelona to do some work for the Catalan government on creating community homes in Barcelona. And I'd never really been to Spain before. I'd been as a child once, but not properly as an adult, and fell in love with Barcelona. Fell in love with Spain as a country and a place that had fantastic food, amazing ingredients, but the most incredible food culture. That it was just around you, it was local, it was based around brilliant ingredients. You did so little too because the ingredients were fabulous. You didn't need to disguise them in complicated sauces. You enjoyed the most glorious roasted red pepper because it was the best roasted red pepper in the world. There was nothing better to do to it than put a flame on it and then enjoy it. And at that point, I knew what I wanted to do was to open a Catalan and Spanish deli and restaurant. And anyway, years went by, and that's what started to happen. I planned more and more of my company meetings in Barcelona because we had consultants all over the UK, and ironically, at that time, it was cheaper to get 20 flights from all over the UK to Barcelona on EasyJet than bring 20 people up to Liverpool on the train, on a Virgin train. And it was a way also for me to do my market research, eat out, drink out, visit places. And when you change your vista, and especially with a vista like this, you can't help to become more inspired and more creative at what we did. So I remember sitting on a park bench, a couple of myself and my colleagues coming up with this idea of individualized budgets where people didn't get a service but got money to organize and buy their own support and care. Now, we wouldn't have done it if we weren't sitting up there. I mean, it creates a very different process in your brain. So, my midlife crisis was in full swing at this point, that I was going to stop what I was doing. But at this point, I was 45, and I remember when I was 20, 45, seeming really, really old. And I think now I'm well past 45 now, it is pretty old. And I'd left it too late to do the conventional thing of opening up a small little neighborhood place, learn how it works, make a success of it, and then go a little bit bigger and, and learn what I was doing too. Doing it this is one of the first things that we did. I wasn't that stupid that I went from never ever running a restaurant to just opening it. So Elaine, my lovely wife here, supported me all the way through my madness, because my madness was we were going to sell everything we'd ever had and acquired and put all of that into opening this restaurant. And we started out actually just on the street in front of here on Hope Street at the Hope Street Festival about 7 years ago. Set up a stall. I took 2 days off work. I cooked for 2 days. I made endless tortillas, albondigas, just to see if I could hack cooking in large quantities, and if people in Liverpool liked Catalan and Spanish food. They did, because we sold out, and my little plan to cover the cost of the store rental gave me enough to do another food festival and another food festival, and 5 food festivals later, this was 8 days of actually sort of working on a stall like this. We set about opening up Lunya. If people have been to Lunya, you know we're just opposite the back of the Blue Coat by Waterstones and Harvey Nicks. And we took a complete and utter empty space. These 2 units are where we are now. We had outside walls. We had a floor. There was a hole cut in the floor waiting for a staircase to be put in. And that was it. And in 2008, we had all of the money to do everything we needed to fit the place out. And then in 2009, we started to hear things like Lehman Brothers and all those other things. And all of a sudden, half the money went very, very quickly. Because the advice at the time was, don't panic, hold on. This is a short-term blip. Give it a few months. Things will come back. Well, it didn't. And so we started out, we'd signed a lease, we'd committed to this, and we're missing about £300,000 at the time. But when you're in deep, there's only you've got to keep on keep on working at it. And in the end, we ended up borrowing our last £120,000 at 49%. This is like a Wonga loan for business. That 120,000, I think we ended up paying back about 340,000 on that. It was astonishing. But the great thing is we did, and we're here. And this isn't a story about, well, I made everything and lost everything. Still may do, but and so we opened, and this is what we turned that space. Pretty space, really, really lovely space. It's one of the hardest things I discovered was going from something where you think you know everything, people think you know everything about what you're doing, and probably what I used to do. At the time, I knew more or less all there was to know about that. People would come to me and say, look, what do we do? We've got 1,000 people in an institution. And I would not come up with ideas, come up with a plan to do it, help implement the plan, and 1,000 people with learning difficulties would live in their own homes. On the night we opened, someone asked me a question of, the Coke machine's not working, what do we do? I still don't have a clue. I got rid of the Coke machine. You know, one of those things you see 16-year-olds using McDonald's every day of the week. Well, ours wasn't working. And what do you do with a broken Coke machine? Well, you run out to Tesco's and buy a couple of big plastic bottles of Coke to get you by for that night. But I found myself with the knowledge of a 16-year-old apprentice on the first day in charge of this big operation that I didn't understand at all when I look back. At the time, we employed 56 people. One of the things I've learned is how to run the business with 41 people, which means we don't lose money anymore. So there's some good, and if I'd have started small, I'd have known that. But it was really tough, and I felt like this guy every day of the week that was riding a penny farthing over the cobbles. At the end of that day, I was in. My testicles were all over the place, believe me. It was horrendous. And one of the worst things was every day, and it was every day except Christmas Day, I would park in the car park in Hanover Street, press the button. This was at the start of my working day at 7 o'clock, where I was exhausted, stressed, depressed, thinking my world had finished, and the one message the lift gave to me was going down. It gave me a very uplifting message at the end of the day because I was going up, but when we were 3 days away from bankruptcy, it felt as though they had insider information. But it was really, really tough, and we were properly up. You know, people talk about being up shit creek. We had our clothes, we had our furniture, and that was it. There was nothing else to sell. We'd run out of money. And luckily, Christmas 2011 came, and it was great. And we went through from being 3 days away from bankruptcy to being 10 days away from bankruptcy. And now we don't think about bankruptcy. I mean, we're far enough away, I think, that's not a worry. But it's a horrendous place to be, of not really knowing what you're doing. But you've got to figure it out. And we tried to be a business that's very, very different, because I came to this not as a restaurant professional, really as a customer of restaurants, and I didn't want to replicate the things which I didn't like that I saw in the way restaurants run. So we cook and make absolutely everything. We buy meat, fish, vegetables, spices, and then we make everything from that. We don't buy sauces or stock cubes, nothing at all. We make our own bread, absolutely everything. But it's the really, really difficult thing to do. We always employ local contractors. Before we opened, we started a pre-recruitment scheme where, we took 20 youngsters and not so youngsters who'd either never worked or had never managed to hold down a job, and did training to get people to the point where they stood a chance of being appointed. We appointed 5 of those the people from that scheme. So we really wanted to do things very, very differently. And as time went on, you get to know the raw materials you've got. I got to know how to work the Coke machine. Still got rid of it because they're lousy things. It's much, Coke's terrible. You shouldn't drink it anyway. But people who insist on drinking it, we'll serve it to them. We've got gorgeous, fizzy, organic fruit juices as an alternative. But we learned very, very quickly and learned that going out isn't going out to be fed, is going out for an all-round social experience. More often than not linked to human emotions. People go out, as they did last week, to celebrate graduations. People go out to commiserate the loss of a loved one, to celebrate a divorce, to celebrate a wedding. And we've had all of those. In fact, I recruited one of my members of staff who was celebrating a divorce by giving them a glass of bubbly and got talking, and then discovered that they were celebrating a divorce, not a wedding, because I assumed they just got married. But it was a new partner, and appointed someone that way. But it's tough. Conceptually, it's really simple. This isn't the Higgs boson particle we're trying to discover. I'm trying to fry potatoes perfectly on the plate with a lovely sauce over them. But just to give you an idea of, we source our potatoes from 7 different places, gradually getting further and further away from Liverpool. At the moment, it's Cyprus, to enable the potato on the plate to be crisp and the right colour. And at the end of August, it goes back to Claremont Farm, and they run out in January. Then we go to Ormskirk, to Kirby, to Evesham, back to Italy, and then to Cyprus and back to Claremont Farm. That's the obsession we've got about trying to get it right with single ingredients. But as soon as you think you've got it right, seriously, something significant and major goes wrong. And that can be anything. Dropping something on someone. It's the worst experience in the world to have a drink dropped on you. Especially if it's sticky, especially if you're wearing a pink, expensive top. It's not good. But that happens all the time. So where are we now? Well, not that... The dropping doesn't. It's just always sod's law that the few times it happens, it's always a lot over an expensive top. Or at least a person says it is. Until we look at the label and see Primark and know that they're after a more expensive replacement. Well, we're not too sure what we're going to do next. We may just have Lunya till the end. We may try opening another one. Our big fear is, as soon as you start to do something else and take your attention somewhere else, that what you've created starts to suffer. And we're very, very passionate about that not happening and very worried about that. I'm just going to very, very quickly finish with these 6 things. What have I learned? Well, what I learned in this change is the more terrifying something is, the more important it is to do. It would have been so easy, and I can think of lots of other things I've done where the sheer horror of it means you'd turn away from it. If you feel really, really sick in your stomach, I think you should give it a go. For me, it was so important to know all the risks. We knew we could lose everything. In fact, we knew there was an 85% statistical chance we would lose everything. But we went into it knowing that. I also knew with this was going to involve every second of the day of my life. And so involving those you love and those you're important to, who're going to tell you very honestly how things are, is so important. We went into it, as I said, willing to lose everything. We have changed so much over the last couple of years. If we know something isn't working, we fix it really quickly. We try to be really nice, which is unusual in the restaurant industry. People who've worked in restaurants will know their own horror stories of owners who pay people badly, treat people badly, lie on the menus. We don't. We try to be ethical. We try to do things right. And we always try and strive for perfection, knowing that we'll never, ever get there. So last night's potatoes, and everyone was too kind to say they weren't as crispy as they should be, because this is the end of the Cypriot potato season. And we know for 6 weeks we're going to send potatoes out half crispy, because you can't get potatoes dug out of the ground at this time of year pretty much from anywhere in the world that you can fry. And very lastly, 4 years on, we became the Northwest Restaurant of the Year from the Good Food Guide, which is our first real proper award, really, of judges, of professional judges saying we're doing a good job. Thank you.